when you underline, and that's going to change to what you think. The only changes we made are. Okay, so.
Test.
What underlined in the strength that you didn't consider.
I know. Thank you. Let's see.
All right, I'll do a public service announcement.
Please do go right ahead.
Can I have your attention, please? This is in case anybody needs to get up and go to the restroom during the meeting. If you head down the hallway that's next to the Rejoice in the Lord, on the right-hand side, women's room is first door, men's room is the second door. If that's full, we have some more restrooms over on this side, down this passageway, but this is more for the school. These are more handicap accessible. If you have any questions, come and see me.
Okay, thanks everybody for making time in this nasty weather for our special meeting. It is 6:38. I apologize for starting us late. The traffic was a bit problematic. We're going to begin with prayer led by Mark Dion.
Please bow your head and pray with me. Gracious Lord, Heavenly Father, on this day we pause to remember the sacrifices made for freedom throughout the past centuries. We do indeed owe a great debt of gratitude to those who have paid dearly for the liberty we enjoy. Yet, O Lord, I know that good government, peace, and freedom are really gifts granted from your fatherly hand. As we remember those who've served our nation, help us to remember that civic duty, no matter how well done, does not grant entrance to your kingdom. We are saved by grace through faith in Christ, apart from our works. Freed from the law's demands, I know that I am now free to serve my neighbor for my neighbor's sake. May the sacrifices of those who have gone before me serve as examples. When I meet those who have served, remind me to thank them. Almighty God, guide the leaders of our nation. Watch over those who serve in our armed forces, especially those far from home. And above all, grant that we, your children, by faith in Christ, may find a field of service in which we, as salt and leaven, may uphold up righteousness, order, and peace. In Jesus' name, amen.
And for the pledges, Jan Duncan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
He's got a hat. Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Yeehaw!
Somebody complained I didn't start here.
Thank you very much, Jan. Okay, now, first of all, welcome and runoff state convention results review. All right, so for the runoff, we had pretty good results. In my Senate District 24, we had Don Buckingham win. Very happy about that race. Yeah. In the state, the Court of Criminal Appeals, place 2, Mary Lou Keel won. She's got a lot of contacts here in Travis County, a lot of relationships here. And in place 5, unfortunately, Brent Webster did not win. Scott Walker won. And so we had that. Railroad Commissioner Wayne Christian won. Yeah, so excellent on that. State convention results. You have a new, for those of you in SD 14, you have a new committee man and committee woman. So the committee woman, Jan Duncan. And committee man, is he? Fernando Trevino Jr.? Okay. Hopefully he will be here. Our own Randon Steinhauser from SD24 is the new SD24 committee woman. Mike Goldman won re-election in SD21. And Linda Kinney won re-election in 25. So yeah, it's a good results all around. Anybody, well, let's see what I forget. Oh, I'm gonna be a national delegate. There were some other, thank you. There are gonna be some other folks, any other, yep. Olga is a national delegate, very cool. And David is, that's right. Where'd David go? There we go. David Duncan, national delegate. Yeah. That's right. Rosemary is the SD 14, sorry, the CD 10 presidential elector. Yeah. We haven't spread the word a lot about electors because it's quite possible there could be some weird tension and pressure on electors this time. So they tend to keep a low profile until after their election, which is in December. So we'll say more about that after that. But you all know and love Rosemary, and she is for CD 10. All right, so that's pretty much it on the runoff and convention stuff that I had on top of my list. Yeah. If you worked the runoff election last week or the early voting ballot board, would you please stand so that we can recognize you? Wow. Thank you very, very much. This could not, all of the other stuff we do wouldn't matter if we weren't manning the polls during election time. So thank you all very much for doing that. Caitlin, are you here? I didn't see it. There you go. We have, Caitlin is the new field regional director for the Abbott campaign. And Travis County is one of her counties, and it's important you guys get to know her, and she's gonna talk for a couple minutes about what they're up to.
Didn't realize I'm on TV as well now. All right, so I emailed all of you guys at some point or another. I just wanted to introduce myself so there's a name to the face. So one of the things that I'm specifically working on right now, not only just in Travis County, but across the entire region, is we are very lucky to have this wonderful list of new movers, which are all known Republicans here that have moved from another state to Texas. And these are all people that I would like to register as Republicans in the next few weeks, if not over the summer. The list isn't too long, but if we can break it up by precinct or even by like region within the county, we should be able to knock it out pretty quick. But this is gonna build the base of Republicans that we have not only for this election cycle, but for all future election cycles. And so this is something that our campaign is really focusing on, as well as just building these neighborhood teams And it's a little bit of a different, like a new sort of concept, but this is something that's worked for the Democrats in the past. Williamson County is one of my other counties. I actually was sitting down with a lady while I was waiting for her. Let's see. I was sitting there waiting for this lady, and right in the table next to me was actually a Hillary Clinton national delegate explaining to this other lady all the local races and little races that they were focusing on, where they were like, well, we can get a hold here, we can, do this, and this is what our agenda is. And then that same weekend was when Hillary Clinton came into Austin. And so I'm looking, into the future. We have about 5 million unregistered of voting age people who are going to either be registered Democrat or Republican or not at all, depending on where our efforts are. And those are all potential voters for us as a party, but also for the Democrats. And we know in the past that they've had a very strong sort of like a machine to register people and just get people involved. And that's how Obama won in the past. And we've looked at their model, we've studied it, and now we want to do the same thing, but better. So I'm working not just with you guys, but with people outside of the party. And, we want to build these neighborhood teams, people who we can count on in all future races, including, ours in the future. So these are, teams and people that we're trying to contact. First off, we're registering the known Republicans, going out and registering the new Republicans, and then building up these teams of people who we can count on in the future. So that's kind of that. Does anyone have any questions initially? Okay. Well, if you guys have any questions or anything else, you all have my email address, and I'll be in the back. So hopefully I can chat with you all. Thank you.
For those of you who were not able to, I was not able to, but I did hear that, I did hear from those delegates who were able to attend the Abbott campaign and Abbott University classes at the state convention that the technology they have and the training they're doing should be very, very useful and compares very favorably to the other things we've used in the past and to the things our opposition is using. So look forward to taking advantage of the things that the Abbott campaign is making available. I've had the pleasure of staying in contact with Glenn Bass, as many of you may have, and for anyone who doesn't know, Glenn Bass was the Justice of the Peace in Precinct 2 up until election year and a half ago or so. His predecessor in office, I did not have the pleasure of knowing. Her name was Barbara Bembry. Some of you may have known her. I use the past tense because she passed away this morning from lung cancer. So I don't have any details yet on service information, but if you would join me in just a moment of silence and thankfulness for her and her service. We're very fortunate in Travis County to have had the services of a lot of great people, and it's nice to take a moment and remember. So. I will now, it is 6:49, now officially call the business meeting to open, call it to order, and introduce our parliamentarian, which is, as usual, David Duncan. Thank you very much. Now, you all emailed a copy of last month's, or earlier this month's meeting minutes. Yeah. Are there any comments or discussion on the meeting minutes? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes as distributed, raise your card. Excellent. Any opposed? Seeing none, it's unanimous. Excellent job as always, Lauren. Thank you very much. Is Steve Campos here tonight? Yeah, I don't see Steve. Steve Campos, Steve Nielsen, Barbara Conley, and I met last week, right? Time kind of gets blurred together. Yes, last week, and reviewed status of the adjustment that we talked about earlier this month. One of the things I realized I had not made crystal clear, there's not a question of $7,000 in cash not there that was ever cash. The balances we were reporting included both cash and this adjustment. So we talked and asked Steve Nielsen to go back farther. Sharon Williams also met with us. She was one of the assistant treasurers for. Yes. Sorry, Steve Nielsen is the current assistant treasurer. Has been for just under a year now. In 2014, though, there were 4 different assistant treasurers. Yeah. And so Steve, in going back to balance the books all the way back to January of 2014, found that adjustment and that it didn't, as far as he can tell, should not have been made. Couldn't figure out why it had been made, but stopped at the beginning of 2014. After our meeting last week, we asked him to go back further, as much farther as he needed to be able to reconcile it. His assumption is at the beginning of 2013 will do the trick. I have told him that it is critical to me that before the end of my term, which is in 13 days, that the party know exactly where it sits. My estimate is that once the outstanding checks clear, including staff pay, that the total of the cash balances of the Travis County Republican Party, which we had raised about $45-ish thousand last October with our gala, that the cash balance now is around $3,000. So as we talk later about legal entities and moving assets and stuff, this is just to reinforce it's not a big chunk of money is not the primary point of the legal entity. Okay. I apologize for neither Steve Campos or Steve Nielsen being here. I had understood they would both be here, but I will follow up with them and make absolutely sure that they are here, not here, at our meeting next Tuesday when we finalize things before the end of my term. Okay. Which brings me to the next item on the agenda, which is a review of RPT rules changes. So I want to do this for a couple reasons. Yes, Joe. Yes. So good news and don't know news, right? The good news is that the federal account and the federal filings are all 100% accurate for sure. They match to the bank account, to the penny, as far back as we can go. It was unclear during our meeting whether the state filings, the TEC filings, were in fact in the same shape. We don't have that answer, but that was one of the things, so we left the meeting. Am I right, Barbara? Yeah. We left the meeting saying that we needed that answer before the meeting.
Point of information.
Yes, TJ.
What would it cost to have a full-blown company do a full-blown audit on our funds so we know exactly what we have from a reputable CPA firm?
Yeah. Well, checking for the funds, that's pretty straightforward. You can look at the bank accounts. But in terms of how much does it cost to have an outside CPA firm do an audit, at my company, which we've got a fairly small company, we do a few $1 million a year, our audit is about $15,000, and we get that's about the best deal we've been able to find. So it is not an inexpensive endeavor for sure. Yeah. Now, that said, all of that said, I would encourage anyone who would be interested in helping us make sure that we've got this right. It's your EC. come up and see me after the meeting and I'll connect you with Steve, and you're welcome to have access to anything. You know, that's what Barbara's been doing for a while now. And it is important that we have multiple sets of eyes on this stuff.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman, have you talked to the RPP to discuss the problem with it? Are they aware that we have a financial problem in Travis County?
Well, they know that we don't have buckets of cash sitting around. And they've known that for a while, right? They've known that we've had depleting balances. Right now, we don't know. The issue that could be a problem would be if our filings are incorrect. We don't know yet if our filings are incorrect. So we don't know. But that's the answer we need from Steve, and we're supposed to have it before the meeting on Tuesday. So I will follow up. At the state convention, one of the most important things we do, you know, there are three big things we do. We elect delegates to go to the next level. We talked about that. We do the platform and pass platform items, and we pass rules. And the rules are really important, partly because they guide how we elect delegates to the next level and how we do the platform. I had the pleasure of serving on the Rules Committee with our own Bill Crocker, who represented SD 14. And we had good representation from across the state and got a lot done. I'm gonna do a brief recap right now of some of what happened, because some of what happened directly relates to the rest of our conversation tonight, okay? So, probably the first thing we did is in rule number 4, where we added a sentence making clear that rule number 4, sorry, these are not the bylaws of the Travis County Republican Party. These are the rules of the Republican Party of Texas. They can be found on the Republican Party of Texas website under rules on the footer. You can also see under the convention state, they have a bit on rules as well. So I'm just gonna give you the highlights of what we did. The first thing we did was make it clear that while we adopt by reference the Constitution and the Texas laws with regard to elections and parties, we don't necessarily waive any of our constitutional rights of free association. That was in Rule 4. In Rule 7, we did a couple of things. One thing we did was make it so that you, executive committees, may now do votes to add new precinct chairs by email if you choose. So it doesn't have to be you can vote to fill precinct chair vacancies in person or by mail or by email now. You have the options of mail and email now that you didn't before. We also made it a requirement that from now on in the SREC be record votes. So you'll never have to worry, you'll never have to wonder again how your SREC representatives voted on a major issue in front of them, right? Amendments and such, those can be just voice votes or such, but record roll call votes for final votes on issues at the SREC. In Rule 8, in terms of supplementary rules, we made it clear that the agenda of the organizational meeting call, so when you have your organizational meeting, which we'll be talking about in a minute, the agenda has to include the adoption of bylaws and rules. And then we also put in a requirement that SREC bylaws and rules have to be modifiable with a plain majority. It can't require 2/3 to modify the SREC bylaws.
That point of information, Mr. Chairman, that rule would not, if once we do our bylaws, if we want to say to change our bylaws, we have to have 2/3 or 3/4, we could do that. This rule is
correct.
From changing that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Let's see. Other major changes. We made it clear that for any state or county executive committee, including you guys, any member of the committee is allowed to record any proceeds of the committee or any subcommittee. So no one can ever tell you you're not allowed to record, take pictures, live stream, what have you, any meetings moving forward. We never did anyway, but if somebody tried, they'd be wrong. Meeting notice. Apparently in some counties, they've had issues with either the executive committee meeting notice not being communicated well or subcommittee meetings not being communicated well. And so you guys are going to have to include in your new bylaws a bylaw and or rule for the notice of such meetings, right? So if you have a committee, like say the steering committee, that is going to have meetings, you guys should have a bylaw specifying what the rule is about notice about that meeting. And then you have the right to attend that meeting. You're a member of this body. This body has enacted that committee. Therefore, you have a right to observe the gathering of that committee. You can't really very well exercise that right if you don't have notice about the meeting. Okay, so again, as we're going through bylaws, you need to think about this stuff. There's a new addition of a Rule 8J on county chairman abandonment of office. Now, if you will recall, back in 2015, the legislature passed new law that had provision on county chairman abandonment of office and precinct chairman abandonment of office. If a precinct chair missed four or more meetings in a row, you all as the executive committee could vote to have the county chairman write a letter to that precinct chair asking whether they wanted to remain chair or not. And then if they did not respond or if they didn't want to remain chair, then they would no longer be chair and you'd move on, okay? And you could then fill that vacancy. There was a similar provision for county chair, which is if a county chair missed 4 or more meetings in a row or failed to perform a statutory required duty, then you all could ask the SREC to make a motion. The SREC could pass a motion requesting the state chair to send a similar letter to the county chair, asking the county chair if they were abandoning office. And if you got no response or an answer that yes, they were abandoning the office, then you could replace the county chair. This new Rule 8J lists those things and then adds a couple of others, and I'll just read the sentence. A county chairman may be deemed to have abandoned the office by failing to perform statutory duties, failing to attend 4 consecutive county executive committee meetings, embezzling county executive committee funds, being convicted of election fraud, or other behavior designed to disgrace the Republican Party. A written demand signed by at least a majority of the precinct chairman of a county executive committee shall then be forwarded to the officials committee of the state Republican executive committee. If the officials committee find that the complaint has merit, the officials committee shall conduct a hearing, then shall forward a recommendation to the state chairman for consideration under the code that I just talked about. Okay? I have been, when Jerry Lynn Ward, where's Jerry Lynn? Right here. Jerry Lynn Ward is the chairman of the transition committee. And she and I met with Robert Morrow this past week. We talked through these rule changes and we talked through the proposed bylaws. And I told him the same thing I told everyone I talked to at state, and I told him the same thing I'll tell all of you now. This exists. My hope is that it serves as a deterrent for otherwise potentially wayward county chairs. But I would strongly, very, very strongly recommend that this not be exercised. Okay? remember how the process works. If you get through all of this, then the state chair sends a letter asking if you want to give up your office or not. So a response, a negative response saying, no, I don't want to give up my office, that's kind of the end of it right there. So you would have gone through all of this. I call it a nuclear option with all of the fallout and very little of the hit on target. All right. So I hope it has some deterrent effect. The body at the convention passed it, but I strongly recommend that what you are doing is the better course, that finding a way to manage the county party by people who care about the county party and not worrying about people who don't is actually the much better approach. Now it's up to you guys. You guys are the executive committee, not me, but that's my strong recommendation. But it's there, so needed to know about it. Yes, sir. Yeah, okay, so the question is, why is it there? You're right, it does not have a lot of teeth. It has a little bit. It's there because people wanted to have it there, right? Why do you have any rules? And it is not to say that state law around what those consequences might be couldn't change and might not change. So it's not necessarily unwise to have it. I just wouldn't put I would not put my faith in that. I would consider that an option of last resort and figure other ways to deal with it. That's all. Yes, sir.
But is it true that if the sheriff or county chair in question sends back that they do not want to abandon the office, there is no recourse to the yes rec of the sheriff?
That is my understanding, right? So could be that that's not a true statement, but that is my understanding.
Would the remedy for that be the state legislature pass?
Yes. So yeah, the question is, would the remedy for there being not much teeth in this right now be some change to state law? Yes. And I would just tell you, think about how easy it might be to get legislators to pass a law that would allow serious repercussions for an elected position. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Now, that's not to say, things change. We're getting incremental change. One of the last things, and Lord, I hope they do this at state, it would make managing caucuses so much better. A convention by majority vote can adopt rules to utilize an electronic system for determining which delegates and alternates are present. Boy, that would be nice. So, there's some open meeting there. Before the SD conventions, we didn't have an issue with this, but apparently some other counties did. Before the SD conventions, if you've got a committee meeting before the SD convention, you have to provide notice. If you don't provide notice, then whatever the committee did is null and void, and you just take care of it on convention day. Okay, so that's a new rule with a little bit of teeth. Let's see, other changes. The biggest change is coming up. We did not make any changes at all to national delegate items. There was serious threat if we would do anything on that. In rule number 31, we as a county have had our Senate district conventions where the nominations committee filled in what was left over after the precinct caucuses made their delegations. There were some counties that weren't comfortable that the current wording even allowed that. And even if it did, they didn't have any guidance of how they might do that. And so there's now much more explicit wording saying it's totally up to a county whether you use a nominations committee and just do everybody at large, or you have caucuses by the precinct and then you fill in what's left by the at-large. And there's a bit that says unless the rules override it, the default position is that the at-large group can promote someone from a precinct caucus who's been set as an alternate and move them up to a delegate, but may not otherwise mess with the choices of the precincts. So that default was set in there as well. It doesn't really affect our county, but that's been it. We tried to add some bits. There were a lot of concerns, and I ran into this, of people calling me upset that they were delegates to state and didn't know when were certain votes going to be taken, what was going to happen, where should we meet up, who else was in the caucus, all of that kind of stuff. And so we added a rule saying anyone running a caucus, anyone running for office or currently in an office. There were a lot of concern about whether the incumbents in office had access to email data that maybe the challengers didn't have. And so we tried to add a rule that said any one of those people running a caucus, running for an office, or in an office could get access to the email list of the delegates, and the delegates didn't like that. They were worried about spam, so they voted down. So in general, you'll need to do whatever you can do to try to help your fellow delegates be informed before the next one, because right now they can't. No one running their caucus can actually communicate with them. There is a new legislative priorities committee that will be set at the state convention. So the platform committee will still handle platform items, but there's a new and separate legislative items committee that will come up with up to 5 legislative priority items. This will give your SREC members 1 additional person that they can nominate to a state committee from every Senate district. It also gives a way to get more people involved in picking those items out. We added all the rules to allow for the plank-by-plank voting. How many people were at state? Man, that's awesome. How many of you read more of the platform this time than you had before? Yeah, it was pretty amazing to watch an hour-ish, an hour and a half after the body kind of didn't adjourn, but had gone to rest or gone into recess. People sitting there line by line reading every one of those 249 planks. Yeah, there was. There were people sticking around and making sure that they really understood. Now, I had actually originally voted for the rule to require 2/3 majority for anything to stay in the plank. We had some people who were very concerned that if we had 2/3 majority requirement and the plank-by-plank voting, that would be seen as some sort of establishment plot to kill half the platform. And so, I mean, they were really concerned about that. And so we went back and instead made it a majority vote, and it turns out they all passed by 68% or more. Yeah, 2/3 majority would not have killed. 2/3 majority requirement would not have killed a single one of them, of the 249. So hopefully next time that rule will be changed. But it was a significant improvement, and I think a great step in the right direction, making sure that we really are comfortable. The last big rule. One other quick one. All SREC members are now officially ex officio, non-voting, non-motion making members of every county committee that is in their district. So Jan is in SC14. SC14 is in both Travis and Bastrop County. Sorry, Fernando, welcome. I called out for you earlier. Everybody give him a wave. We got Fernando Trevino here. They are ex officio, non-voting members and non-motion making members of this body and of the Bastrop body. There were, again, for some weird reason, there were some county chairs who wouldn't share, wouldn't include them in the meeting calls, wouldn't send them meeting minutes. And we have 4 SDs, so there are 8 SREC members who are ex officio, non-voting, non-motion making members of this body. So they can speak to the body, they can do everything but make a motion or vote on a motion. Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
If one of those SRC members is also a city precinct chair, then in their capacity as precinct chairman, they are allowed to vote.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct. Yeah. So my hope would be that we'd spread it around and you'd have, separate precinct chairs and SRC members and, get more people involved. But yes, if you had one that was doing double duty, that would be covered. There's a new rule 44, which is the censure process that the platform has been asking for a couple of years. Well, actually for 2 sessions, so for 4 years. You can read about it online. It's one of those things where actually this one has some teeth in it. The teeth that it has is if it's invoked, then the Republican Party of Texas and or the county party can choose not to be neutral in a race. So if you have a sitting Republican official that has violated extremely enough to get 2/3 of this body to vote against them, to vote for censure, and then it get referred up to the SRC and 2/3 of that body to vote for censure, and a request for this action to be taken, if it makes it through all of that, then you could choose not to be neutral and you could endorse an opponent in a primary. Okay, so that's the teeth. It's got big hurdles for good reason. It has to take, 3 violations of defined principles as defined in the preamble of the platform. There's big hurdles for good reason. But the platform's been asking for this for a long time, and we now have it. So that's it on the rules changes, and thank you for your patience on that. As you heard, there are several pieces that affect both the body going forward and these bylaws that we're going to talk about tonight. Any changes on all that? Yes, TJ.
Can you talk about Rule 8D, which is that 50 people, 50 EC members can call an organizational meeting?
Yeah, sorry, I glanced over that. That was one of the smaller, but it is a meaningful change. In 8D, the organizational meeting of a county executive committee, it says the county chairman shall be responsible for calling the meeting, the organizational meeting. However, if the county chairman does not call the meeting, it doesn't say how long you give them to do that, then 1/4 or 50 of the precinct chairman, whichever is fewer. So here in Travis County, we have 85 elected precinct chairs who will take office, whose term starts on June 13th, right, with no further action necessary. Those 85, 1/5 of that, no, sorry, 1/4, 21 or 22 of those could call the organization, may by written demand call an organizational meeting. So 22 of the 85 who were elected in the March 1 election could call the organizational meeting if Robert does not call the organizational meeting. Now, that said, when Geraldine and I met with him the other day, he said, if you guys can find you guys work out a time and a place that is favorable, I will absolutely endorse sending out the organizational call with the proposed bylaws, assuming they look somewhat like they are proposed right now. He would endorse those going out with that call, and he would endorse getting the call out on the 13th. Now, we're required to give 14 days written notice, and we're required to send those the organizational call and the bylaws out to those 85 people via snail mail. Okay. There are some counties, we tried to get approval to do it by email, but there are some counties that were very concerned about their elected precinct chairs not getting the notice if it didn't go out by snail mail, so we're required to do so. Okay. So he is, or the 22 of you who decide to do the call if necessary. If he doesn't, we'll need to do it via snail mail. So we'll have to get out 85 letters and 85 copies of the proposed bylaws in that call for that meeting. And right now is the time on the agenda where we say, okay, where and when do you guys want that meeting? Robert said he was fine with it. Any date, since it can't happen before the 27th, right? You have to give 14 days notice starting on the 13th. He was fine with you guys picking the date, and he needs someone to pick the place. So do you have any suggestions on when and where you want to have that meeting? Yes, sir. Because he doesn't care. I mean, he really doesn't. And, you know, in the past, you all have preferred Tuesdays. Tuesdays have worked out the best for the most. If I were picking one from the air, I would say Tuesday, the 28th of June sounds just fine. It's more than 14 days after the 13th. It is a Tuesday. It's not the 4th of July weekend. It's, you know, as far as I know, it doesn't conflict with anything else. Okay. TJ moved. We have a second. Bill? It was seconded. Okay. Discussion.
Is there any question that for those expecting when it's mailed and when it's received? And you've got to allow some slack for it to be received 2 weeks before the meeting, I think, in order to be absolutely safe.
Okay.
And you also have to have somebody ready to send it out and funds to fund the mailing and ensure we have all of that covered also somewhere, somehow.
Correct. Okay, so for those who couldn't hear Bill Crocker, he said 2 things. I'm going to take them in reverse order. One, we have to be sure we have someone ready and able to print them out, get them in the mail, and pay for the postage. Right? 85 pieces of mail, even fairly heavy mail, $85 ought to do it, right? Somewhere around there, $85 to $100, that'd do the trick. From a postage standpoint, we have a great printer that we can get these printed off on. That's not an issue. But he is right. Someone has to put them in the mail. And then his first point was, if we're required to provide 14 days notice, do we have to make sure that they are received more than 14 days before the effective date? Or are we okay if they're simply postmarked 14 days in advance? We have a comment from the floor that the postmark is probably fine.
Looking at the rules, it says, Rule 8D says in 2 places, mailed at least 14 days prior.
Okay, the rule is very specific. It says mailed 14 days.
However, that's the last possible time to do it, and Proctor's comment earlier about allowing time for receiving things would probably indicate it's a good idea to get it out as quick as possible.
Well, certainly, and I would certainly not recommend, you know, we're going to talk about it now. We're going to talk about it again at the meeting on the 7th. We should probably give a couple of emails heads up. We would not count on strictly the written copy, but the requirement is that mailing be mailed 14 days in advance. If you had the meeting on the 28th, that would actually be 15 days in advance. If you got it in the mail on the morning of the 13th, which I can't think of any reason why you couldn't if you had plenty of advance notice, which you do.
Point of information.
Yes.
The chair asked Michael Morris if he would make sure that happens. Because I can't ask Michael Morris that. I can only talk to him.
Okay, so Michael, the question on the floor is, would you be willing to take the responsibility for getting those out? Excellent. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I'm not clear as to how cooperative we have agreed to be with the lieutenant. Are we going to everyone attend the meetings and calls, or are we going to work through friends?
Okay, so the question on the question on the floor. Yeah. If it's okay with you, I'd like to split that question into 2 parts. The first part is for the purposes of the organizational meeting. The organizational meeting is only guided by the by election code, right? There's nothing else to guide starting the organizational meeting. So my recommendation to all is have as smooth a plan as possible and as cordial and cooperative a plan as possible to have the organizational meeting and have that out of the way. Now, Robert's already seen the proposed bylaws and the proposed organizational plan under which the bylaws are going to operate, and has expressed very limited concerns about it. So, if that's true, then that bodes well for future amicability and efficient operation of the party. Well, we can talk about the other part, the legal entity, in a little bit, if that's okay. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah, in any event, you really, really must be at the organizational meeting to make sure you have quorum, pass the original bylaws and all that. We have not yet talked about a location. I'm all ears, but we need a location. You need a location for that organizational meeting. It doesn't have to be decided now, but it needs to be known, and there needs to be comfort around what that location is before next Tuesday. Yeah.
Is this location available?
Is this location available? I'm not sure, but before next Tuesday, if it's a possibility, that needs to be surfaced before next Tuesday.
I'll be happy.
Yes.
I'll be happy to check with the Austin Baptist Association.
Okay, I'd be happy to check with Austin Baptist Association. Thank you for doing that. Wherever you have it, be upfront about who will be attending. Any other? I saw a hand. Yes, Joe.
Mr. Chairman, is this motion to send out a notice of the organizational meeting? Because if that's the case, I don't think that can be done until we have a new executive committee.
Right, now, the chairman or a quarter of the new executive committee members can call the organizational meeting on June 13th. All I'm doing right now is trying to help facilitate to make sure that that gets done and done as quickly and as smoothly as possible. In fact, everything we're doing tonight is only to make sure that the next executive committee runs as smoothly as possible. That's all.
My question is, how can the executive committee, one point of the executive committee call the organizational meeting if the executive committee, the new executive committee doesn't exist yet, because we haven't been seated?
You don't have to be seated. You are in position by merit of being elected.
And we have to do it in writing by written demand.
Yes, and again, it is my assumption you won't have to do it at all. You only have the right to do it if he does not. He expressed an ability and willingness to do it, right? It says, if the county chairman does not call the meeting, then 1/4 of the precinct chairman, right? It doesn't say 1/4 of the executive committee. It says 1/4 of the precinct chairman. So 22 of those elected in March 1 may, by written demand, call an organizational meeting. But again, I don't think any of that will be necessary. He has expressed a perfect willingness to not only call the meeting, but call it under whatever terms you guys want.
Mr. Chairman, in the motion before you just the motion to determine what day you'd like to have.
Yeah, actually, all I was doing right now was asking for a point of information from the floor, so asking for some input from the floor on preferred date of the meeting and location and possible locations for the meeting. And in fact, we'll just leave it at, think about where you might be able to have this meeting, and let's talk about it next week, because somebody needs to include a location in a call.
Point of information, and I'm not calling the question, but point of information, isn't there a motion on the floor suggesting that we have it on the 28th of June? And has that motion been seconded?
Yes, it has, and we're actually, you're right, we've been in the discussion for that, my apologies. I've let us go a little afield on that. Any further discussion on whether or not the meeting ought to be on the 28th? Seeing none. Is everybody in favor of requesting the meeting be on the 28th? Yeah, everyone in favor of requesting the meeting, raise your card. Excellent. Okay. Any opposed to requesting the meeting for the 28th? Raise your card. Let's see one. Thank you. Thank you. Couple. All right. So the motion carries. It will be requested that it be on the 28th. Now, unless someone wants to make a motion for a specific location that they're sure you can have it on the 28th, I would just ask you all to keep in mind, somewhere in the next week, somebody's got to find the location. So if you have an idea, run it down, see if it's available, and hopefully there'll be 2 or 3 choices, and the body can vote next time on which of the 2 or 3 choices they want to have. Okay? Clear? Good? Yes, sir. Yeah, the question is, do we need to put a time down? You do. Our meetings have been at 7. This one was at 6:30 and it was a little rough. Is there a motion for a time? Yes, John. You have a question?
Are we 20 people getting together on 13th to sign a letter?
You don't have to if he does the call.
Right. So he's going to do the call. He's going to do the call. If not, 20 people get together and sign a letter. All that's happening on 13th, all these things. Otherwise, you can't have meeting on 28th.
Well, if he refuses to do the call on the 13th, then either 22 of you can get together and make the call on the 13th or on the 14th, and those same letters are already prepared, can just go out. Yeah.
In that case, we wouldn't be there.
Yeah, he would have, well, he, as county chairman, he is a member of the executive committee, and every member of the executive committee is allowed to attend any meeting of the executive committee and any subcommittee of it, right? We talked about that in the rules. So, yeah, he will be the elected chair and therefore part of the EC and therefore able to attend any meeting.
I move that we accept 7 o'clock as a good time.
Okay, we have a motion for 7 p.m. for the meeting start time. We have a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of 7 p.m. Raise your card. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimous. All right, so we have 7 p.m. on the 28th as the preferred time. Again, this is just what will be proposed, for the call that he will issue on the 13th. Okay. That brings us to the review of the current bylaws and rules on amendments to the bylaws. You all have a copy of the bylaws. May I have a paper copy? Thank you. Okay. There are a decent number of rules about amending our bylaws. And actually, I'll just give you the short version as I remember it. The short version as I remember it is, this body, at any meeting, can review proposed changes to the bylaws, must refer those to a bylaw or rules committee for presentation back to the body at the next regular meeting. And then those proposed amendments presented at that regular meeting can be passed. So this is a special meeting at which we will talk about the bylaws changes. We cannot pass changes to the bylaws tonight. We can talk about them, we can refine them, we can make some suggestions, we can include some things we know we need to then refer them to bylaws and rules committee for re-presentation at our next regularly scheduled meeting, which happens to be next Tuesday. At that meeting, the body can pass the bylaws. And remember, the point of all this is to make it really, to have already worked out all of the thoughts and concerns and questions about the proposed bylaws, so that when the new EC takes office, this is one less thing they have to worry about. Okay? Good. All right. Now, having said that, now we can get to discussing the meat of these changes. The goal of these changes, as proposed, as I understand from the transition committee, which actually, first of all, transition committee, chairman, Jerry Lynn Ward, Bill Crocker, Olga Lasher, Tim Miller, and Steve Nielsen, all current precinct chairs, all elected in March to serve on the new EC. Oh, sorry, Kevin Peckinham, I left him off the list. And Kevin Peckinham. Again, all current precinct chairs, all elected in March to serve with the next EC. They've spent hours thinking about the best ways to deal with this, to deal with the transition to the new chairman. And what you have here is the proposed bylaws, which you also have a Google Docs link for a while on, represents that thought. And the intent behind these bylaws is not to in any way usurp authority that is specifically restricted to the chair. It is to exercise the authority you all as the executive committee have and have always had, and just have not necessarily chosen to exercise directly, have chosen to delegate historically to the chair. Now, you're taking Robert at his word that he's not that interested in exercising that authority, not that interested in the objectives that that authority is usually geared for, and therefore, these bylaws either return some of it, undelegate some of that authority, or delegate it to in a different way than delegating it to the chair as you have for the last few years. Okay? So this is not, to be very clear, this is the EC exercising its own authority and choosing how to delegate its own authority. Okay? And the majority of these are actually taken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jeremy, but the model for this is taken from the SREC's bylaws. Correct? Okay. So, that said, instead of delegating a bunch of authority directly to the chair, to have the chair then appoint officers that then have to be approved by the body, these set of bylaws create a new committee called the steering committee. Have that steering committee, of which the chair is a member, but not a majority, have that steering committee then appoint, or the body directly elect an executive vice chair, who then takes on some of the duties that the chair would have taken on, okay? Including up to and including running the meetings. Now, what I would encourage you to do over this next 2 years, if you want this to go as well as possible, exercise your authority, but as always, don't abuse your authority. All right? There is a fine line between making sure that you guys are able to smoothly do what you need to do and unnecessarily drawing attention to the situation that attention on is the last any of us want. Okay, so that's it. Shall we run through the bylaws changes? In the first, removing that the executive committee manages the biennial senatorial district convention fund. That's removed, I assume, under the intention that a separate legal entity will be funding it.
Are we doing this point of information? Do I have to take point of information to ask questions? I mean, yeah, what is the reasoning for why we're striking managing the biennial senatorial district convention fund? And if we're not going to manage it, who is going to manage it under these bylaws?
Under these bylaws, yes, sir.
That was brought to my attention. I think that originally there was something in there about that or something. I'm not really sure what's called that, but I think there was.
Thank you.
For information, is there actually such a bylaw? Is it just a motion? Or is it like, okay, that was something? I'm not really sure what's called that, but I think there was.
Thank you.
Is there actually such a bylaw? Is it just a motion? Or is it like, okay, that was something?
Yeah, it's not, there's not actually a separate fund designated the Senatorial Convention Fund. Senatorial District Convention Fund. So I would, I would recommend rewording it so Senatorial District Convention Funds, right? Just make it plural, it's the money for those.
Motion in order to unstrike section, Article 2, Section 2D. Is that a motion in order to unstrike that?
Yes, we might as well take these one at a
Do
time.
that?
Yeah, let's do it that way. That would be
I
best.
still move that we.
So there's a
unstrike
motion
that.
on the floor to unstrike this and keep the responsibility of the fund with the EC. Is there a second? There is a second. Any discussion?
Just to be clear, there's no main motion regarding the passage of these
Correct.
bylaws.
There is no, these are strictly motions on amendments to make to send to a committee. That is all there. These are not sub-motions on a major motion to adopt, because remember tonight we can't, right? Yes,
So is
sir.
the intention to send these corrections to the rules committee?
Yes,
Bill?
yes. And anyone else who'd like to be on the rules committee. Yeah.
The committee then can digest those suggestions
Right.
the best they can. They're not mandatory on.
Yeah, I would like to go through these as motions so that the committee has the benefit of the sense of the body, so that next week goes as smooth as possible. If it looks like it's just taking way too long, then we can deal with that separately. You okay? Okay. All right. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion on whether or not to strike this?
Could we add the S to the funds while we do this?
Okay. So an amendment to the amendment, adding the S to make it clear this is not actually a separate fund. Is there a second to this amendment? There's a second to the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of the amendment, adding the S, so it's clear it's not a fund, it is funds. Okay, all opposed? Okay, carries. All right, so now we have the amended item. The motion is to unstrike the amended item. Any further discussion on whether or not to strike this?
I'd like to ask if there's any other member of this transition committee that has any comments about why it was struck to start with. Why did you strike this to start with?
These people, I don't know.
The original.
I asked if there were any other members of the committee that remembered why.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
Sure. So as James mentioned, these were taken from the SRAC bylaws as a model for how we operate here. Essentially, the SRAC is an officials committee, called the executive steering committee. The reason I put a strike through this by some proposed language to the transition committee was because the fund doesn't exist. That was
Right.
plain and simple.
Okay.
So that's why it's struck. It's not a special fund.
Okay. So now, for anyone who couldn't hear, so the proposal to strike it was because there is no such fund. No. There isn't an account called the Senate District Convention Fund. Therefore, and that means this is no different than any other expense, so why have it specified as such? Yes, Bill.
Is there a possibility that this is a reference to those monies that are raised by selling tables, selling advertising in the program and stuff like that, that may or may not, their reason go to the county party?
Actually, they did. They always came through the county party, but they might not in the future. Yeah.
This
So
would be a reference to those funds if we are not careful.
true. Although if the committee is responsible for managing it, one way to manage it would be to outsource it. But that would be that could be an issue. So you've heard from the committee. The reason why they struck this is because It is, there are two possible reasons. One, the committee may not be the one managing the funds around this. And two, there is no such fund. So that is why it was struck through. You have a motion to remove the strike through. You have a second. We've heard discussion. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of removing the strike through and making it a responsibility of the committee to manage the biennial district convention funds. Okay. All in favor of removing the strike through and making the committee responsible for that, raise your card. Okay. Those opposed? I believe the nays have it. Okay.
So we left it struck.
So we left it struck. That is still struck. In Article 3, Section 1, the executive committee shall consist of the county chairman, who is the presiding officer. The who is the presiding officer was removed because later there's specifically wording to say that the executive vice chair would be presiding over most of the business portion of the meetings. And the precinct chairman of the respective election precincts in the county, all of whom are elected biennially, that portion, all of whom are elected biennially were struck because some are elected by this body at some point in the middle of the term. It's complete. It is both unnecessary and contradictory. So that was the reason for removing that second half. Any discussion on
Point of
these?
information, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, you did.
That's got a PEC 171.022 at the end of it. Can this body, or can we change what the Texas election code says or not? That's my question.
Right. You can't change what the election code says, but if the election code already says it, there's no reason for you to repeat it.
It's also not appropriate to strike it out if that's in the election.
Yeah, but I'm trying.
Strike it out. In the election.
Well, you could strike out reference to it.
Strike it.
Right, and that's what we did. That's what is proposed.
Okay.
Now
I make a
remember,
motion
sorry,
that we strike-
again, let me be real clear. I didn't actually make any of these proposals. I am acting as the chair in recording these. None of this is my proposal.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we strike at the end of that line, we strike TEC space 171.022.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to, in addition to the strikeouts that are already there, to also strike out the reference to that portion of the code. And that's seconded. Mark? Some are, some of these have references to election code, some do not. Yes. Okay, the question for the committee is what's the, well, and don't forget, these are amendments to amendments to amendments of bylaws. The original of these would probably produce something like 8 years ago. I don't know if there's anybody here who was present on the Rules Committee at that time. Yes, Jerry Lynn.
That is not changed in reference to the other parts of that are mentioned in the code. And the reason that you have sites to the code is so that people can go with and see what authority to have that bylaw. But there's nothing contradictory between what is here for strikeouts and what's in the code.
Okay, so for anybody who couldn't hear Jerry Lynn, what she said is the reason there are references to the code is so that people can go look up and see under what authority or in what framework this bylaw behaves, or under what authority it is enacted. She said that this particular one, 171.022, talks about the structure of the executive committee and is not in conflict with this section 1 with or without the portions removed. Yeah.
I've got changes the, up here it says, I think it's, 171.002 contribution.
No, not 0.002, 0.022.
I misread it.
Okay, thank you.
I just said that the first one has to do with county chairs and elections.
Correct.
The second item says the precinct chair of each county election precinct measures that the general primary on the majority vote of the qualified voters of the precinct who vote in the primary office, subject to section 171.0221, or appointed by the county executive committee as provided by the state.
Okay, so if you could hear what Tim said, what he said was, what this specific reference code said, precinct chairs either elected by majority from their precinct or appointed by the body. And so this original bit that was, this original bit being struck out prevents this bylaw from being more restrictive than the code was. And confusingly so, because it's not the way the body actually behaves.
And it's not the way that the election is.
And it's
not even close to what the election code
It's
said.
more restrictive than what the election code said.
So if you strike out the election code, that's going to be wrong.
Right. So again, there's a motion on the floor to strike out the reference to the election code. There is a point of information stating you could do it either way.
I think this is a point of information, Mr. Chairman. Are we voting on instruction, recommendations to?
Correct. These are recommendations to the Rules Committee to then come back with next week.
Not mandates.
Yeah. No, because we don't know that we don't know that the makeup of the people who show next week are going to be the same as the makeup of the people here
just say, I agree that there are bylaws, and we should put in there whatever we want. But if we're getting on Texas election code, when we are bastardizing Texas election code, then we're liable. That paragraph comes from Texas election.
Okay. So we have or another against, Mark? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, I feel like that. Citations, that's all it is. We're not saying that that's we're just saying it's the authority. Which is perfectly normal. If we have this without any citations, all kinds of people going, we're going to get authority to do this. Okay? And so without that authority, we, we're kind of going in, we need that to form the basis of what we do.
Okay, so that is two opposed to the motion, one in favor of the motion. Is there another in favor of the motion? Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay, any other in favor of the motion? Our bylaws require alternating debate, right? Okay, so seeing no one else in favor of the motion, all in favor of the motion, raise your card. In favor of the motion to strike the reference to the code. Okay, all opposed to striking the reference to the code, the nays have it. All right, so that does not carry, and now we are on to 3, which clarifies that executive committee members serve for a term of up to 2 years. 19th day, right? The 20th day starts the next term, so ending on the 19th day after the next primary runoff. Any discussion or section? Seeing none. That takes us to Article 4, Section 1. And this starts the meat of the changes. So, in addition to the county chairman, the elected officers of the executive committee shall be the executive vice chairman and secretary. That's it. And then it gives details for the executive vice chairman and the secretary. Yes.
Aren't we required to have a treasurer?
Later, this has the elected officers by the body being the executive vice chair and the secretary, and then later the committee appoints treasurer that the body approves. Yes, sir.
So is there rationale why the treasurer was taken out from being an elected position to be an appointed position?
All right. I mean, I will tell you that I'm else. I know that, but let's ask the committee what guided them to make this choice.
Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but my thinking in that, because we didn't discuss that, because the reason the steering committee is putting people circulars regarding treasurer and some of these other positions is it requires specific talent to do these things. And so we thought that the steering committee as a body could get together and focus more on finding someone who has the skills necessary for those positions.
Okay. So, was everybody able to hear Jerry Lynn? Okay. Excellent. We're currently in Article 4. Okay. All right. So now that was Article 4, Section 1, the intro. Now to Part A, the actual duties and items of the executive vice chair. At the organizational meeting, Part A probably should be A1. shall be a voting member of the executive committee, shall be elected by the executive committee at the organization meeting. This shall be a voting member of the executive committee, I read that to mean, and the intention in that to be, that mean that this is a precinct chair. Okay. I have heard a comment that that's probably not clear enough, and therefore, the rules committee certainly should look at making that much more clear if that is the intent of the body. Then under B, it's just a process for voting for the executive vice chair.
Point of information,
Yes.
can we hear from the committee on whether that was, what their intention of Article 4, Section 1AA means?
The committee said no. The committee said no. The committee said no. Pardon? She said they meant it to be a precinct chair. Okay. The part B, C, and D are just how you handle the voting, and this probably came right out of the SREC. Yes, Jeff.
Well, a question for the committee. I like this method, but what happens if the chairman fails to participate at all, does not appoint 3 non-nominated precinct chairs? What happens? Is that going to hold up the phrase? Or can you do something like to say the SREC members could come out?
I was trying to raise that in a private conversation with here a moment ago. Probably we're going to have to revise this to say that the chairman of the meeting, there will be a chairman of the meeting, and the group has selected all likelihood, but we haven't gotten to the point where we know sure that's going to happen either. And these rules are taken from the SREC rules, which presume the action of the elected chairman. And so we got to fix some of that in all likelihood.
Right.
It may be we cannot count on the same two.
We cannot. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going through this.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Everybody gets 5 minutes to speak. We talked on 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's quite possible 3 minutes would be a better time. That was the question on the floor was, you might want to consider less time than 5 minutes each.
That's a typographical error.
That is a typographical error. Okay. All right. So if there's no further discussion on part A there, then B is the secretary. The secretary is required to be a person who resides within Travis County who voted. There's not a similar requirement that be a precinct chair. Any big discussion on that? The remainder of that section is saying how you manage to vote for that secretary position.
Are we going to go through and do these each section at a time? Because like we have 5 minutes on this one, or are we just going to?
Sorry, the question was, are we going through each of these section at a time? Yes, we are. And the question was, it says 5 minutes here as well. I made an assumption that when they fixed the typo in the prior one, they would fix the typo on this one, but it's good to bring it up. Thank you. I'm sure they will now. So thank you for bringing that up. There is a strike through removing the portion that says all officers elected and appointed shall serve at the pleasure of the county chairman. Again, that was a delegation you all did to prior chairman that you're now undelegating. Section 2, the term of office expires concurrent with that of the executive committee. That just is. The executive vice president, vice chair, and secretary may be removed by a majority vote. That's a new set of provisions.
I make a motion that at the the end of that, the executive, where it says may be removed by majority vote, we add of the EC.
Okay, yeah,
So that it's
so
not
the,
the so it's not a majority vote of the steering committee, it's a majority vote of the EC.
yeah, I believe by the context, that was the intention, but good motion. So the motion is to add, a majority vote of the executive committee. So add the words of the executive committee right after the by a majority vote, first part that's underlined in section 2. Is there a second for this motion?
Second.
There's a second. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. All right, quorum for the meeting is the same quorum required in Article 3, Section, and Article 3, Section 4A. A requirement of 40% of the total membership. So the same quorum that's required to elect in new precinct chairs is the quorum required to vote out an executive vice chair or secretary. Yes.
Point of information on the last sentence in section 2, where it says, except that in the event of a vacancy in the office of county chairman, the appointed officer shall serve only until the election of a new county chairman. What is that and why?
Yeah, Jerry Lynn, that last sentence that's in brackets, that portion that's in brackets, that was intended to be a removal, or was that section 2, Article 4, section 2, the very last, all in brackets? Was that intended to be in the strike through? Okay, well, it looks like it's added after a period. That doesn't seem to make sense.
Now, the May 2nd document, so
Yeah, that, okay.
Jerry Lynn had to manually add back in strike through. So yes,
Yeah, that's
the
fine.
intention was that that whole sentence was struck through.
So this was printed in the Google doc, it's like you don't show up. Except for the-
And you go back down and manually do that on the
Yeah.
also.
So
And that kind
if
of-
you would, that's a strike through.
Oh, really? Okay, then I'm gonna have to-
Yes, Joe.
So right before that sentence that we just struck through, it says officers other than county chairman, executive vice chairman, and secretary may be removed by majority vote of the steering committee. Is that the one that we just changed to executive, or is that still steering?
No, that's still steering committee, and that's why I said by the context, I think it was clear that the other two were only executive committee because this specified steering committee. This said other than them, it can be the steering committee, but we've now made it explicit. Those two officers can only be removed by a majority of the executive committee. All other officers can be removed by a majority of the steering committee. Officers are appointed by the steering committee. Still section 2. The bylaws specify an additional officer of treasurer, but they also allow for the officers who are not a secretary, not executive vice chair, and not treasurer. Other officers can be created, like an outreach director, like a fundraising director. You can create, the steering committee will have the same authority that you guys have delegated to chairs in the past to create other officers. That steering committee that can create them can also remove them. That's what this says. Cool. All right, any other questions on section 2? Moving on to section 4. A vacancy will be filled following the same original procedures we had before and using the same form as before. And then Article 5, this is the creation of the steering committee, whose primary job is to take on a lot of the things that you in the past have delegated to the chair. The steering committee shall be composed of the chairman, the executive vice chairman, the secretary, the treasurer, a precinct chair appointed to serve on the committee by the chairman, and 3 precinct chairs elected to serve on the committee by the EC. Guess what? Well, that's true. And once they do, the treasurer, by virtue of their role, becomes a voting member of the committee. Similar to a corporate board of directors who elects the CEO, and the CEO is frequently a member of the board of directors. Same thing. You know, they would undoubtedly have to recuse themselves in conversations about them, right? Yes.
On the precinct chair appointed by the chairman, what will we do if that chairman doesn't appoint the precinct?
Then he would have one less vote on the committee.
Okay.
Yes.
So in Aggie's office, assuming that everybody does play, there's 8 votes.
Correct. And so adding all these up, there are 8 positions on this committee. Correct.
And so are we looking to make it an odd number, or is there a reason to keep it even?
Not really. Do we feel it critical that there only be, you know, an odd number of positions on this committee? I was answering for everybody saying I thought. If any of you feel strongly that it must be an odd number, I would just tell you, you know, just because there are an odd number of positions doesn't mean everybody shows up, and then you're back to an even number. So what was the point? Okay, so that's the makeup of the committee. Not being the one who came up with this, but, you know, caring about the organization. I think this reflects the right kind of balance between you guys exercising the authority you have and not abusing the authority you have, right? There's a difference between minimizing and shutting out. And this, I believe, reflects the right kind of balance. Okay. In my opinion, which, you know, come the 13th doesn't really matter, because I mean anybody. Okay. The rest of this, part A, yes.
In Article 5, Section 1A, it says the voting members of the steering committee shall be the chairman, secretary, the precinct chair appointed by the chairman, and 3 EC representatives.
Yeah, so that says the treasurer does not have a vote in the committee. They're a member of the committee, but they have no vote.
But in Section 1, you say the voting members of the steering committee will be. So don't we have to either strike the treasurer out of Section 1 or add the treasurer in Section 1, subsection A?
Yeah, no, he's right. The word voting should be removed from the headline of Section 1. It says composition and voting members, and then lists the treasurer. All right, so I'd recommend a subheading that says composition, all right, for the intro part. But yeah, you're right. Maybe that becomes A, and then B is the voting, right? But that is a little confusing. Well, that was my recommendation, is just remove the word voting.
Well, part of the purpose of having titles of sections is so that you know what that section is composed of, and that section, any subsection, tells you who votes and who doesn't. So it's a title, so that people can easily pull it into the bylaws and say, okay, which sections touch upon the question that I have.
Yeah, the committee will take a look at that, but duly noted that that particular heading in that place as organized could be confusing.
With the colon.
Yeah, with the colon, could be confusing. All right. So A does specify that the treasurer is not actually a voting member of the committee.
Back to your odd
Yeah, and that. Okay, B, election of 3 representatives. Basically, again, you're electing 3 representatives from the body, from the floor, following the same kind of defined process there in 1, 2, 3, and 4,
And
5 and 6. And it contains the same typo error of the 5 minutes. So, yeah. You're right, it does. Okay. This is probably as good a point at as any to stop and say, guys, somebody's gonna have to step up for these, right? So my recommendation for the agenda for the organizational meeting would be for you to, and you're gonna have to think about this carefully, but for you to either renominate and elect all of the previously appointed precinct chairs, right? So that then they can vote on everything and then pass these bylaws and then hold these elections, right? Something like that probably should be the agenda or the order of business. You need to be thinking about whether you're willing to serve in one of these positions. There's a lot of responsibility here and several positions. So please be talking amongst yourselves. Now, I have heard a couple of questions of, have you, James, already thought about who these people ought to be? And the answer is no, it's not my responsibility. And in fact, I have no authority in that, right? I'm not in the EC come the 13th. No, I mean, I certainly have people I would encourage to try, but you guys, the elected EC, you need to be thinking about this next couple of years, you're going to have to take on more responsibility. I can't wait to see who does and how they do it and the great things that happen when they do. Thinking and praying real hard over the next week about, where you can make the best impact. There are a lot of slots. Yes, Mark.
Would these meetings necessarily be in person or be conference call?
There were, if I recall, there's actually specific provision for conference call meetings later in the bylaws. It was either later or earlier, but there was specific provision from. One of the issues is you're going to have a rule in here about how you give notice about meetings, and advance notice of a conference call meeting is going to have to include conference call info. So you're going to have to figure out how that works. Let's see, so that is all of section 1 there. Section 2, quorum, meeting, voting, and proxies. Quorum for the steering committee is half or more of the voting members. Yes, Joe.
Yeah, I need to say something about this. When we did this, it was clear that the rule changes at the state. And so in section 2, this is taken from the model of the SREC, where we say, except when declared open by majority voted committee or by the presiding officer, either in the call of the meeting or after the meeting has been ordered, all meetings of the steering committee shall be in executive session subject to the provisions outlined in 427 of the Article Rule. I think that rule side is wrong, first of all. And second, I don't think we're going to be able to have.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, good. Excellent point, Sherilyn. You're right. This provision was drafted and proposed before state convention, but, and I had completely missed this part. But yeah, I certainly would not recommend that the steering committee meet in executive session any more than I would recommend anybody else meet in executive session, any more than absolutely necessary.
I would move that that portion that I just read be struck.
Okay,
so
the head of the rules committee is saying is that she's actually in favor of removing that whole bit about executive session being the default. Is there any opposition to that? Okay. Go forth and prosper, Gary Lynn. Good. There's no opposition to that. Okay. It says they're not, no proxies are allowed for steering committee meetings, and there will be written minutes of the steering committee meetings. And again, steering committee is a committee of this body. So as members of this body, you will have the ability to join in on any of those meetings, be present at any of those meetings, record any of those meetings, right? All the transparency stuff that applies will apply to the steering committee as well. And then section 3, any other comments on section 2? Yes, Bill. Yeah, it's well, okay, quorum is 50%. Does it say majority? I don't know that it specifically says anywhere. I mean, it says the elections have to be by a majority. It says a majority can remove somebody. Yeah, his question was, does it anywhere here specify that a simple majority is all that's necessary to vote anything out of there? It's not, but I don't know that there, but it doesn't specify. By reference, all of our rules incorporate Robert's Rule of Order, and the default is simple majority, except in very rare cases. So the majority of those present, yeah, you specify what quorum is, but that's the majority of those present, assuming quorum's been met. Yeah, 50% is the quorum. Right, so you specify the quorum, and then you have the vote. And the vote is guided, unless specified otherwise, by Roberts, which the default is always majority. It was specified in other places it only took a majority, but we don't have to always specify that. Thank you for the question. Okay, so in section 3, it shall be the duty of the steering committee to assume responsibility for transacting the business necessary between meetings of the executive committee. Robert has said that it is his preference to only do quarterly meetings, because frankly, it's his preference not to do meetings, right? But you guys have the ability to call meetings at whatever order you prefer. Once you've had your organizational meeting, and you have the ability to call that if it doesn't get called, you guys decide amongst yourselves when you want to have a meeting. His statement was he would prefer quarterly, but of course it's up to you guys. So whatever you decide. Just if you're going to have them more often, you're going to need a place more often. Just got to work that out. Okay. And obviously, the farther it is between your meetings, the more the steering committee is going to take on and responsibility for handling duties in between the meetings. And then 1, prepare the annual budget, submit the budget, execute written contracts, authorize expenditures, appoint the treasurer of the finance committee, parliamentarian sergeant army. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make an amendment to section, whatever article it is, section 3, section B, to appoint, I would like to amend that to say, to appoint with concurrence of the majority of the members of the executive committee present in a call meeting of the executive committee. So the steering committee would appoint the treasurer of the finance committee, but the EC would approve those appointments. The same way when you as chairman appointed, you went to the body and said, I appointed Matt Skobiak, are you gonna, do we want to? And everybody from me said yes.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised not to see that. I thought that actually was in there, but you're right, that's not.
Let's talk about it's the duty of the steering committee.
Yeah, it's the duty of the steering committee to appoint them. So you're delegating to them the ability to appoint these positions, just like you delegated to me the ability to appoint positions. But TJ's point is correct. And when you delegated to me the ability to appoint those positions, it was always subject to, which you guys gave, because I didn't appoint somebody crazy. But, all right, so his motion is make it subject to approval of the body. And Jerry Lynn seconds it. So, any discussion in opposition?
Not in opposition, but we would have to go back and fix the fire, where they can remove them without any salvation.
No, because remember, even where the body approved them, there was that sentence where they serve subject to the approval, to the pleasure of the chair. So I had the ability to remove anyone at any time. When I appointed someone, it was subject to your approval. This would be the same. This would be, they could remove at any time by a majority vote. But if they bring someone in, it's a majority vote subject to your approval. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor, raise card. Okay. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Great suggestion, thanks. Okay. And so those positions, and basically it's just, and it's all there with item 8. Other special or ad hoc committees is made deemed necessary. If I were you, I would probably also add a catch-all for, other officers / special or ad hoc committee, right? I would give the committee the ability to appoint other officers as well.
Are you saying that, are you asking for point of information? Are you suggesting that 8 say other officers and or ad hoc committees?
Yeah, I'm suggesting maybe there's just like 8 is other special ad hoc committees, maybe there's a 9 that's other officers as deemed necessary, right? Is there any opposition to that? Okay, seeing none, noted. Joe?
So if someone is not, how do you fill a vacancy on the steering committee? Is that outlined, or do we need to outline that?
There was a provision for filling vacancies of the other positions. General officers, vacancy. Okay, I don't see a specific, I don't see it. So, Jerry Lynn, you guys will want to add, you may just be able to more or less copy the section 4 under Article 4 and put it, 4 under Article 5. But yeah, there should be a provision. Basically, you should repeat the process to fill a vacancy.
Point of information.
Yes.
Where the county chair gets to appoint a person to the steering committee?
Yes.
I'm assuming, okay, and the EC cannot stop that, which I'm not suggesting we do.
Right.
But can the county chair firing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just like it didn't specify how you refill a vacancy, it didn't specify. I would assume that the wording would go something along the lines of, any vacancies would be refilled in the way that they were originally filled, so that a vacancy of the county chair appointed one would get filled by county chair appointing someone else. And that begs the question of, well, how does that one come empty aside from them quitting? Well, it might come empty because the chair may decide he wants to replace them. There should be a provision allowing for the chair to, at their pleasure, remove that person and or replace that person, right? With another qualified precinct chair. Did I zip through that way too fast?
No, I
Okay.
You're saying that you can essentially fire his appointment.
Sure, yeah, it's his appointee. There ought to be some stuff that he can fire them and he can replace them, and you could fire, just like you can fire yours and you can replace yours, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but you're right. That's the second layer down that we haven't thought through yet. So that's why we're having the conversation. Excellent. Okay. All right, the sections 4 and 5, the steering committee may call an executive committee meeting. That explicitly gives them the right to do that. Section 5, the term, all the terms expire concurrent with the executive committee. That is anyway, but it makes it clear. Then Article 6, duties of officers. Yes.
Who's got a question? Who is
who's going to have the responsibility for managing the primary? In other words,
Yeah.
who picks the primary administrator, and who manages the funds that we get from the state?
Yeah.
Is that set in the election code?
That is, okay, so the question is who manages the actual primary and who manages the money for the primary? And I will tell you that that is all specified in the election code, to a level really that I seriously wish it were not. In my conversations with Robert, he has said, you know, if people will tell me what I need, you know, because I've pointed out, I mean, it goes to it is not allowed by law for anyone other than me to sign the checks for the paying the people who are working the election. Literally, during the primary. No one else can do it. I can't even, I'm not even allowed to delegate it. In some counties, sometimes they get a stamp and they kind of get away with that. But in a case like that, that example I gave to Robert, he said, okay, if it's something like that, tell me what I need to do, I'll do it. And the reality is, you know, frankly, we've had really good people last couple years telling me what I needed to do. So like the call for the canvas is going to happen here in a couple of days. You know, I had good people looking out for me and tell me, you know, hey, you got to give 72 hours notice and it has to happen by June 2nd. So, you know, let's get the notice out. He's going to need the same. So far, he has given every indication that the stuff he must do, he will do. He would sure rather not, and he would rather not do any more than he'd have to. He will. The best example I can give is that it appears clear to me from my interactions with him so far that he does not have anywhere in his list of priorities causing damage to the Republican Party of Travis County. That's not a goal. It might be a side effect of some things of which he has goals, but it does not appear to be a goal. And to the extent that, you know, in my conversations with him, he said, look, if people work with me and they tell me what I have to do, I will do what I have to do. And that whole thing with primary and all that stuff, man, the election code is far too specific. The county chair and no one but the county chair must do a lot of that stuff.
Okay, who is going to be the person who will agree to be with him long enough to instruct him what to do?
My hope and prayer is that the steering committee and this body come up with an executive vice chair and some other officers that are keeping their eye, that the steering committee is keeping their eye on stuff, that the officers who are elected are keeping their eye on stuff. Them, that the executive vice chair is going to be being the main liaison, the body and Robert as necessary. Right? So
Have we identified anyone who's willing?
I mentioned earlier, I have heard that question several times. I have not identified anyone because that would be the opposite of my place to do. Right? But you guys need to be thinking and praying and talking to each other about who would be good for that. But and being that liaison of saying, you know, and of either being the one to say to Robert, hey, you need to do this thing, or being able to work with someone else who says, oh yeah, I'm going to send the email saying we got it. Right? Here's an email, please reply, please say yes. I mean, half the time that's all. Half the time that's all I had to do, right? Was reply and say, I approve. Right?
Well, it seems like we are going way beyond our obligation to guide him to fulfill his position and stay in office.
Okay, well, if you look at this as whether or not you're held office, then yes, I would agree you're going way above the call of duty. If you look at this as performing to make sure the party is in as good shape as possible, I would say you're doing exactly your duty. Your eyes wide open. And, you know, and if you at times seriously wish you had a chair for whom you didn't have to do that, I understand that feeling. but you do, right? So I will tell you, be grateful that what you do not have, at least as far as I can tell, you do not have a Machiavellian, power-hungry, abusive, wannabe dictator, right? As far as I can tell, you don't have that. And I will tell you that I think that would be worse, right? So now, this might be famous last words, right? I could be proven wrong, but all my interactions so far, I've not been. Okay, so we'll see. Sorry, it is getting late, and I would like very much to be done. The biggest thing here in Article 6 is that the executive vice chair will chair the steering committee and preside over the steering committee and DC meetings. Yes, sir.
Just very quickly, sir. I know we already talked about even nod on the steering committee. What does the steering committee do?
Then the motion fails. Right? Yeah. No. If there's a motion on the floor and you have a tie, it doesn't prevail. Right? So this says the executive vice chair will chair the steering committee and executive committee meetings. I can tell you that, Robert's initial reaction to that was not, he wasn't crazy about that idea. I reminded him that actually it's your choice who chairs your meeting, but I also reminded him that the reality is the meeting is mostly about doing the stuff that he actually doesn't have any interest in doing. So why would he want to manage the meeting to do the stuff he doesn't actually want to do? And he appeared to concur. So it was after discussing all this that he said, yes, I will endorse, you sending out some variation of these bylaws with the organizational meeting. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, there are a couple of election code references in item C, and there's 2 words in item D. So yeah, just keep an eye out for those brackets. They probably are strikeouts. Also have the same thing. Yeah, and so what you see here, again, it's you guys deferring to the committee or the executive vice chair instead of you guys delegating to the chairman. That's really what you're doing.
Point of information.
Sure.
I really don't like the way the definition of the treasurer is. Dealing with the problems that we've had, I would like and I'm not the guy who write the paragraph, but I would like to see a more defined responsibility of the treasurer. Does that make sense to anybody else, or?
I think the statement that says for complying with all applicable state and federal law covers that. If you got somebody that's in that job, you're saying you're going to do it by law. You can't look. You can't start identifying each and every job they got to do. I've already tried that in another.
I will tell you that certainly, given your experience, I would, if I were you, I would be pushing the steering committee and/or the treasurer to be really, really, really to go way overboard in reporting and go way overboard in transparency. I would.
It's just a point of discussion.
Yep.
Would it be possible for us to actually hire a treasurer that's a CPA? Or could we put it in the bylaws that the treasurer has to be a CPA?
Well, I can tell you Steve Nielsen, who is a CPA, who has been our assistant treasurer, has done a bang up job. It has been a big beneficial thing. Right. Well, yeah, we talked. There currently isn't. Yeah, and it will be hard to raise funds for sure. Yes, John.
I think the limitations with the groups that are doing it by field Unless you are people who are in financial or listening to numbers, they just go at the end of the year with treasurer and get back to the audit. Audit company.
Yeah, the Giants' point of having members review, we've had members keeping an eye on, giving a second opinion, but we didn't have enough. We didn't have a good enough process around it. Hopefully, the group has learned from that, and we'll have an improved process moving forward. Article 7, regular and statutory meetings shall be called by either the chairman or the steering committee. Special meetings can be called by the chairman with the approval of the steering committee. By 25% of the total EC or the chair or the steering committee. Oh, delivered either to the chairman or the steering committee or the secretary at least 20 days before the 2-hour meeting.
So point of information.
Yeah.
Does it make sense, because I don't see here, to give the steering committee the ability to call a special meeting? But I don't think that's currently written there.
You're right. Right now, as written, the county chairman with the approval of the steering committee can call a meeting. 25% of the precinct chairs can call a special meeting, the committee or the secretary or the chairman. But you're right, there's no provision for the steering committee to be able to call a special meeting. We probably should add that because if the intent is to delegate to the committee all the stuff you've been delegating to the chair, that would be one of the things. Yeah. Section, yeah.
Yes, it's in section 4 under Article 5, but it doesn't clarify that.
Oh, okay. Article 5, Section 4. Yeah, good catch. Thanks. Thanks to everybody who read them and reread them. Good job. Okay. Yes.
I'll make a motion that we add in Article 7, Section 3, another line that specifically says that the steering committee will have 48 hours notice in advance. The steering committee.
Okay. All right. Sorry. So in section 4, it says committee reports from standing, special, or ad hoc committees will be transmitted to the EC no later than 24 hours prior to the beginning of the EC meeting.
No, section 3.
Notice of meetings, of all meetings, shall be sent to each member of the executive committee by mail or email at least 14 days in advance. We're going to need to clarify. I bet this was intended to only mean all executive committee meetings. Yeah. There's going to have to be all sorts of, there's going to have to be a whole bit that we already talked about through the new RPT rules about subcommittee and committee meetings. And your recommendation is that includes 48 hours notice. So the recommendation to the committee is that those subcommittee meetings, and that the subcommittee meetings notice be done by email at least 48 hours.
So, are you asking us, less than a week to do all the rules regarding notice of meetings that you want people, because that's going to take some time. Those kind of rules are going to have to be thought through, and what we want is for the transition, not to necessarily meet all the requirements of the RP do like about subcommittees.
Yeah. Okay, so, yes,
Why don't we just put executive committee meetings in there, make that clear, leave the other up to.
The problem with this is, you can't have a steering committee for 14 days.
right, yeah, but as it's currently written, you can't have a steering committee meeting without 14 days notice, because it says notice of all meetings. Right? So he's suggesting that you may want to specify executive committee, and you may want to break out any subcommittee meetings must provide 48 hours notice. It just says we have to have a rule about notice. Yeah, it says we have the right in our bylaws to specify our process for notice. So I literally would repeat this sentence, but have it be 48 hours as recommended, and have it by email. Right?
And then we would have another section.
Well, it could just be a second sentence in the same.
I'm not even concerned about the other committee meetings. I'm concerned about, because if you want to have a nominations committee in 14 days, that's fine. But steering committee is there to take care of business now, so just put a line in there.
48 hours, 14 days may be too long, yeah.
But 14 hours on the steering committee only.
Okay, so that's the recommendation, to split them up. Either specify EC and all other, or specify steering committee and all other. And give the steering committee the ability to meet faster than 14 days. Okay, section 4, committee reports have to be provided at least 24 hours in advance of an EC meeting. That's new, we haven't done that, we haven't been doing that consistently. That would mean that would mean you can no longer have a nominations committee meeting right before an executive committee meeting, and then making a presentation of those people at that meeting, so stagger it somehow. Section Articles 8 committees. We have precinct chair nominations committee, and it specifies their operation.
Thank you for membership, there'll be 5 members, nominations committee to 6 members. We currently have 6 members.
Okay, so the committee, the rules committee has taken that under advisement. Thank you, Lana, for that relevant experience. Let's see. That was section 1 under the precinct chair nominations committee.
Under section 1, before the last sentence where it says the precinct chair nominations committee is not required to be a member of the executive committee, but must be a resident of Travis County to vote in the most precinct. I make the motion to put in front of that a line that says, although the chairman of the committee must be a member of the EC, and then a member doesn't have to. So the chairman of your committee has to be a member of the EC, but the members of the committee do not.
Is there any opposition to requiring the chairman of the committees to be members of the EC? Right, yeah, there's been an addition in each of these making it so the rest of the committee members do not have to be. If there seems to be no opposition to that, but he does want explicitly specified that the chairmen do have to be. So, duly noted, thank you. Does not appear to be any opposition to either of them. Great. Okay. That covers resolution, same thing.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to strike in section 2, everything after the word resolutions, and put a period after the word resolutions, where it says the steering committee shall establish and appoint a resolution committee for the purpose of considering resolutions, period, strike everything after that. Which we strike that are not in conflict with the most recent Republican Party executive platform of rules.
Okay, so you are proposing to remove the requirement that the committee not consider a resolution in opposition or in conflict with the current state law.
Pretty much keep saying, in my opinion.
All right, okay, so the party platform says we support capital punishment.
And
You would encourage resolutions?
Then they should at least be able to consider it.
Okay, so any opposition? I'm just trying to get a sense of thought here. Any opposition to removing that remainder of that sentence? Okay, so if you would take that under consideration, recommends removing the not in conflict with portion of that first sentence under resolution. Are you good on that? Excellent. Okay, section 3, Rules Committee. Any issues, concerns on Rules Committee?
Chairman of the resolution committee has to be a member of the executive committee.
The chairman, we just made a blank statement. Chairman of the committees have to be. Anything under rules? Okay. Anything under finance? Okay. Steering committee, in section 5, you probably want to remove the word chairman. That was probably intended to be a strike through. It should be the steering committee may establish.
Oh, yeah, that was.
Yeah. Okay, section 6. Section 7, committee reports shall be turned into the steering committee prior to the executive committee meeting to which they're presented, and no later than 24 hours from the day. So we're adding a requirement on the committee chairman that they provide copies of their reports to the steering committee a day before the EC meeting. All right. Any suggestions, concerns, things not addressed in the bylaws that we haven't already talked about? Okay. Yes, you do.
I would like to go back to something that we sort of brushed over.
Yeah.
That was that the executive vice chairman, their intent of the bylaws was that the executive vice chairman be a precinct chairman already. That we have to be. I'm wondering if we're limiting ourselves, and maybe as long as the EC is going to elect that person, whether that person really has to be a elected precinct chairman. There are a lot of people in the party that aren't precinct chairmen, work around the party all the time, that may be a good vice chairman, but they're not necessarily precinct chairmen at this time. I'm not saying that maybe we want to put in there that it doesn't have, it can be or can't be, it doesn't have to be.
I can tell you I raised that with Robert, and he didn't really care one way or the other whether it was. So I can tell you in my tenure, I loved the ability to get other people involved who couldn't be precinct chairs because there was already a great precinct chair in that precinct. So what's the sense of the body? Is there, TJ is raising a suggestion that maybe you remove the requirement, since he's got to be elected, he or she has to be elected by you anyway. Do you feel necessary to hamstring yourself and restrict yourself to only considering people who are current members of the EC? I'm not seeing a big yes.
Vice chairman should be sort of have the same liability we all have. So,
Once we elect one as vice chairman, though, they'll be a voting member of the board.
Well, yeah, they won't be a voting member of your EC, but it does say they'll actually be the presiding chair of the meeting and the presiding chair of the steering committee as well.
I agree for limiting, ourselves by saying that they have to be member already.
Okay.
Because I know of very talented people who are not members and maybe
Okay, so we've got one in opposition, one in favor. Position?
I think that person, the presiding officer ought to be able to vote to break a tie or to make a tie. And I think that's part of the essential function of the presiding officer.
Okay, and TJ never got to speak in favor of his motion.
Just point out, that right now, these bylaws say the executive, because when I first read this,
Right.
it says the executive vice chairman shall be a voting member of the executive committee. I didn't understand whether that was before he was elected or after he was elected. So if we can say, we can make the executive vice chairman a voting member of the EC after he's elected, even though he wasn't before he was elected, I would think.
Yeah, excuse me, I want to recognize Bill here for a second. Yeah, we do need to double check and see if that's possible. It may or may not be. That may have been one of the reasons why the SRAC members are non-voting. Okay, so that's a couple in favor. I actually can't recognize who this, it says speak for or against. Okay. Yeah, that is a good question. I do not recall anything ever being a tie. Doesn't mean it won't happen, but I cannot recall it ever being a tie or being one where I could have made it a tie. I certainly never had the need to exercise a vote and would sure recommend it for the most part to not. Okay. All right. So we've had some in favor and we've had some opposed. One more opposed. Okay. Okay. So the motion is to remove the restriction on the body that currently would prevent you from electing vice chair who is right now. There is a restriction that would prevent you from electing an executive vice chair who is not a precinct chair. The motion is to remove that restriction so that you could, if you chose, elect an executive vice chair who is not a precinct chair. All in favor of the motion, raise your card. Okay. All opposed to the motion? Oh boy. Yeah. It may not be a tie, but it's going to take a standing vote. All in favor of the motion, stand please. I got 29. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Be seated. Okay. All opposed, please. I got 23. Let's call it 25. It still was, it's still passed. Motion passed.
So that means you could be our executive vice chair, right?
I changed my mind about a lot of things, but the one thing I've been absolutely 100% consistent on, and my wife also, since March 2nd, is that the only person that you cannot elect to this position is right? You really can't.
So you get that get nominated, I will not run.
Yeah, exactly. No, the one thing I don't want anyone to do is to ever jump to the wrong conclusion that any resistance to Robert has anything to do with me desiring power, wanting to stay in control, or any of that, because none of that's true. And so I can't give any oxygen to that idea at all. So there's that. All right, it is late, but
One
yes.
question for you. Is there any way that we can prevent conversations coming before the
the body that, well, let's just say Robert comes up and starts his stuff, that we can say it's not germane to this topic or.
All right, so whoever's running the meeting will have the ability to run the meeting, right? And these proposed bylaws have the executive vice chair running the meeting. So it really will be up to that executive vice chair to run the meeting. My strong recommendation to you guys is that you give Robert his due, which would be a chairman's update. That is, X minutes in duration, during which I can only imagine what topics he will come up with. Actually, I probably can't imagine what topics he will come up with. And let him have his piece, right? He was elected. Let him have his piece, and then let him go in peace. And you guys can get to the business of me. And I would strongly recommend a desire to have an approach like that. As much as those few minutes, however long they are, may not be enjoyable. I would still strongly encourage you to have that in your agenda as a regular portion. All right. Yes. You can put the chairman's report wherever you want in the meeting, right? I mean, that's up to you guys. I would just encourage you again to use the authority you have, not abuse the authority you have, right?
We also have a bylaw that's like anyone who starts speaking for family, we're looking to the right to speak about the meeting.
Yeah, it would certainly be reasonable for you to have some standards under which the report goes, right? Now, which hopefully won't even be necessary. I mean, my interactions with Robert have not required any such statements on my part or anything else. They've just been interactions. I wouldn't be surprised if Robert's rule does have something about decorum, but.
Point. Now on, when you say Robert's rules, you take Robert's rules of order.
Robert's rules of order, yeah.
Robert's rules of order.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Real quick, it is late, but we at least have to bring up the conversation of friends. But Bill, you just gave me an indication. Was there something else to address?
No, that's all.
Okay, we at least have to bring this up. So, my understanding of the recommendation of a separate legal entity is that would be an ideal vehicle for either raising other funds ongoing from donors who are concerned about donating to an organization with this chairman, with the incoming chairman, and for the safe transmittal of all of the assets of the party, the most important of which are not the money, the most important of which are the email list, the Facebook page, the Twitter account, the communications vehicles that you have built up over many years. So
the steering committee wouldn't have access to that?
Well, the steering committee is not going to exist until, at a minimum, June 28th. Right? So that is my understanding. Am I representing that correctly? Okay. So, but that's my understanding is that's really it. So I don't see this as being a massive thing, as being a giant. This is not some we're not the proposal from those who are proposing it is not that this is some replacement of the county. All the rest of this work, the bylaws we just went through, that's for the county party to continue to function and function well, regardless of the leadership or not from the chairman. Right. This is just to provide some safeguards that aren't otherwise provided. The transition committee, as my understanding, has spent some time and effort on figuring out the proper structure for such a thing, but it does say, and my understanding is that there are some resources available that will make it so that this kind of effort would not cost what it might normally cost if you were getting it off the street. I assume there will be some cost involved, right? There'll be some filing fees, there'll be some other stuff at the very least. Very small. Okay, good. So there'll be some nominal expense involved. But even that nominal expense and the effort that will be required has not been expended up till now, because we want to be sure that we got a motion from the body to move forward with that. So I will entertain from the body a motion that the transition committee move forward with creating such an entity. Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Okay, seeing none, all in favor? Okay, all opposed?
Nay.
Okay, noted. You have your motion. Excellent. Thank you all very much. I'm sorry it is so late. Wait, Laura. Okay, that is a great question. The bylaws do not reference social media at all. Some organizations' bylaws do. How will you manage that? Boy, if I were you, I would delegate that to the steering committee. But in the meantime, it'll be under the auspices of the legal entity until and unless, you know, you guys decide otherwise. All right. Any other thing before we adjourn? Yes. The question is, what's the reason you can see yourselves in the computer monitor? We have live streamed the entire meeting.
Hi, Ronnie Eagles.
How many people are watching?
I have no idea. We'll find out later. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thanks. Put things away. Leave it better than you found it.
Well done.
Thank you very much.